Oh, that's what happens when you go live sometimes. The wrong intro plays. But welcome back to Inspired Inc. Not Spilled Ink. This isn't Thursday night. But hey, for you listeners who don't watch Spilled Ink, that's the intro for it. So come and hang out on a Thursday night and draw with us. So there's the promo for that right there. But hey, I'm so excited for tonight. Every Monday night, Sunday night, we bring on these great creators and we're having these great conversations. And every week we have just learned something new. We've been getting so much information from these creators, from crowdfunding to just promoting your stuff to crossing to different mediums. And you've seen this creator here on our spotlight segment that we had earlier this year. And I'm super excited to bring on Lance Lucero on the show. There's so much to talk to you about tonight, dude. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's good to be back. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Dude, definitely. This is we've been in communication for the last like year or so, uh just talking about like your events that you have coming up. You're releasing books, you do film stuff, and you actually do a lot of really in-depth craft stuff with your film. But before we dive into the craft aspect, why don't you tell me about some of your events that you have happening and actually your film project as well?
Yeah, we had a couple of book signings at Barnes and Nobles the last couple of weeks. Two of my local shops in Thorn Creek and Superior. They went off very well. We kind of do something a little different too. My partner shows up in costume from one of our films, so she passes out composite cards as we actually have a laptop running comic book and film trailers at our signing table. So it throws people off for a second, but then they become engaged because they want to know how the costumes are built and what we're doing, what we're all about. And that's when we hit them with the Bob book. It's like, well, it's all about a graphic novel signing. And everything spills into and ties back to Bob, Non-Union Psychic, the Big Book of Bob, Volume 1. I mean, this is what you guys print up for us. This is the good stuff. This is the physical media that people want and they're excited about. So it's been busy. I mean, October is our month. Aside from Halloween, we had the two signings, and we're gearing up for the Warehouse 9 Film Showcase 2025, which will be at the Bug Theater in downtown Denver on November 22nd. One of the highlights, of course, is the Bob spin-off film Coiffeur Extraordinaire, Waiting for LeGros. So in the meantime, it's always about touring the bookstores, trying to get on the shelves, be it on consignment at Barnes and Nobles in my area, Mile High Comics, of course, one of the biggest and most famous comic book stores in the country, and also Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash in New Jersey. We just got on the shelves there probably about 2, 3 months ago. So I've been in contact with them to see how I can sell more books. So I mean, if that hasn't been bad, being in the two most famous comic book stores in the country, and plus branching out to Barnes and Nobles and such. And in the meantime, I tour the stores, talk to people, try to get fanship going. I stay pretty busy with that.
Dude, that's so much to unpack right there too. Kind of to dive into that, I think creators really the one thing we always want to know is how do we get distribution going in some format? Like how do we begin our own distribution? And you've networked, like you said, with two of the biggest shops in the country and Barnes and Nobles as well. What are some of the steps you had to take to get to like network with some of them, or at least get your book inside of Barnes and Noble? I think just some people just don't realize that it's even possible to get things like that happening. Or what key elements do you need in your book to be able to even publish or distribute through them?
I've been keeping an eye on Barnes and Nobles and hearing about their consignment deal that they have, which is pretty neat. And some of the first steps are just kind of getting to know the staff and the management. There are times where they're a little off-putted by someone like me attacking them, asking them questions, getting in their face about how I get my book on the shelf, and then seeing their initial reactions of, oh, great, yeah, we got another writer here that's got a book. Okay, cool. And then when I explain to them, they become pretty interested. But until I show up with a print and put it in their hand, at that point their face lights up. They're like, "Okay, yeah, we're in. We wanna strike a deal and let's get you on the shelf." Um, And that's kind of how the network aspect goes. But you have to get out there. It's not going to happen anymore just sitting behind a computer. You have to get out, meet people, talk to people, go to meetups, talk to the managers at the stores, hang out at the coffee shops. If you don't network as such, you're not going to sell any books. And we were selling books. I can go in and see somebody browsing in the graphic novel section and pull my book off and say, "This is my book. I made this." And then people would be like, "Wow, you did that?" Put it in their hands. They're like, "This is great." And I'm like, "It comes with the free film. You want to buy it, it comes with the free film. I'm here. I can sign it for you if you want." And usually that's how it goes down. Next thing you know, I get a book by, I'm signing it. People are around taking pictures. But you have to go for it. In this day and age, you're not going to get noticed unless you stand on the table and scream, "Look at me." And basically, that's what I'm doing now. I'm tired of dealing with other publishers and distributors that don't get what I'm doing. I haven't found that perfect fit yet. So in the meantime, I'm just taking the reins and going for it. There's no need for any artist to wait for permission to do this. Get your prints made, get out there, get your books on the shelf. Yes, it's daunting and exhausting, but hey, it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, honestly, I mean, it's kind of crazy because I think, I feel in a one big sense, COVID was such a weird transition for everybody, and it took us a minute to remind us what like we had to do pre-COVID. I think we got kind of stuck in this digital setting in a sense where we're just like, oh, the ease of technology, the communication, the podcasts, the everything. It took out a lot of that interpersonal, like, oh, I need to go in and face to face talk to somebody. For some reason, there's just a gap. There's just a divide there, and I see less of that from creators, from everything. There was a big boom of creators during that period, which was great. It gave a lot of people to the chance and opportunity to take up a craft, to hone their craft, to put something out, to work on a project. Sebastian's just making all sorts of special appearances today. Um, but it gave them a chance to do that. But then bouncing back from it, we haven't really just gone out there and done a lot. Cons are one thing, and cons are like the staple. But what you're doing stands out so much. Honestly, like hanging around, your Books a Million or Barnes and Noble shop, whatever you have like nearby you, like bookstore, and just like getting it in that shop and like what you said, network with them. Your local community will support you more typically than any other. And so if you build that local community, that's going to help you grow and get out there because they're going to want to feature all of your stuff like what you're doing. Um on like a technical side of some of that, like, you know, just for the audience to know as well, were you putting single issues in there? Were you waiting till you had your trade completely out? Did you have to get like ISBN, barcode, stuff like that as well to be in there?
Yes, yes. Of course, I waited for the to complete the entire graphic novel, all three books in one with supplemental materials, and including the film tie-in. Yes, ISBN numbers are a must. You have to have them. Um, and of course, the book has to be quality. They just don't accept anything. It has to be something that is eye catchy, that is entertaining, and once they grab onto it, then you start rolling. Now, the managers of the stores, I was lucky to know that Thorn Creek, which is only 2 miles away from me, is one of the top selling Barnes and Noble stores in the city. And Denver's a big city, and there's a lot of traffic going through there. And I noticed it, so that's kind of why I wanted to make that my hub. And it was a good move because the manager there, she knows her stuff. She tours all the stores. She knows what stores are popular, what stores have good flow, good action. So that's kind of where I started to build that aspect of a network within a major bookstore. So they open up a new Barnes and Nobles in Superior near Boulder. I found out that some of the co-managers and some of the people that were running the coffee shop migrated there. So I already knew the people that were there. All I had to do was walk in with the book and say, "I'm on consignment over here at Thorn Creek. Think I can get on the shelf here?" I knew the manager. They were like, "Yeah, we'll put you on right now. Let's get the contracts ready." So like that happened in 5 minutes. You got to have the books. You got to be ready to pitch it. You know what I mean? You don't have time. You gotta know your lines. You don't want to battle in front of these people. They don't have time for it. They're busy people. So you got to be spot on with all your materials. And once they see that it's professionally done with the ISB number and you're ready to sign a contract and you're ready to go, they're not going to hesitate. Because they do say people come in with clip art stuff or some AI generated things that look like garbage, and they're like, no, you got to go. So you don't want to be one of those. You want to be the one that is spot on. So yeah, in that preparation, you get to know the business side of it. You look at your ISBN numbers, quality of your print, and you're ready at that point. You just got to be able to pitch it.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, work on your design and CWS. I mean, made you happy, got you that quality. So I love to hear that. I love that I love that our level of quality of printing is getting your stuff, next to, everything else, all the major stuff that people are buying, where you can literally pull it off the shelf. And I mean, it's going to be more exciting in like a year because we're going to have like cool stuff like hardcovers. Psh, I shouldn't have said that. But also, one of those things too, you've built a universe out of this entire comic and this idea. Like, what came first, the film or the comic? I'm curious on that. Or the idea for turning it into a medium in that sense.
It started off as a feature film 25 years ago.
Oh.
And it got traction at a couple studios. But because I'm a nobody from nowhere without representation, I was beat out by a couple of other aspiring literary books that were on the market. Okay, lessons learned. I didn't have the right backing, the right clout to get this where it needed to go. So in the meantime, I thought about it and said, well, there's no way I can make the Bob non-union psychic film, feature film. It's just too big. It's just too bad. It's just too awesome. So I knew a comic book creator, Adam Foley, who was my co-writer and editor on these books, and said, how do we turn this into a comic book? So we started with a number 0, kind of just to introduce the character, and that is what was based on the actual full-length feature script. So we pared it down to 30 pages or so, and just introduced who Bob was and his world. And digitally, back then, we're going back now 10 years, we had, what was it, Comic Central? Remember Comic Central out of Canada?
Yes, yeah.
And Comixology, and there was one more. We hit 3 platforms for digital, and we were knocking it out of the ballpark. It was like, okay, so what's the strategy? Should we try to go for prints on one issue, or should we just write a trilogy and create a whole graphic novel? What would be the best way to do it? So we really thought about it and said, no, let's create a whole book with supplemental materials. And at that point, I hadn't made the short film for this book yet, but it was on the radar. So we created all the stories back to back. We started to create a bigger universe. You go to warehouse9pro.com and you can delve into the world of Bob. You can see the locations in more detail. You can get dossiers on the character. You can find certain Easter eggs on the site that you have to look for in the book, like, the Telltale Heart or the Book of the Dead. They're in Bob, but you got to be able to find them. You know what I mean? We wanted to make this a little bit more interactive because, as you said, as time progressed, we started to realize that, okay, the social media realm is something we have to dabble in. So we wanted to do it right. And we wanted to create something more for a reader than just picking up the book and reading it and putting it back on the shelf. We want to keep them going. We want to say, hey, you can go to the site and check out a dossier, or you buy the book, you get instant access and unlimited access to the short film. We wanted to do something that was kind of rivaling the big companies. You know what I mean? They're not even doing this. They're not making short films based on their books. They don't have an interactive world. It is just the trades or the single issues coming out over and over again. So in order to step up, we had to go that extra mile and produce more so that people can enjoy the book more. So it was daunting, and it took a few years. Like, I think overall it took about maybe 3-4 years for the books, and then another 2 years to make the film because it was COVID time, 2-3 years. And then things started to come to fruition like the last year or two when I decided to do things on my own, to take complete control of my IP and say, this is how I'm going to do it and I'm going to control it. So I strike a deal with anybody. Yeah, I have representation legally that's going to help me make sure my IP is protected. So this is one thing I think people need to realize. Protect your IP. It's important.
And so, oh man, there's so much right there. So first off, how did you go about protecting your IP? We'll just straight right after that.
After research, I realized that legalities needed to be involved. So one of the sponsors to my film showcase is the Creative Law Network. They're actually my legal firm. So I went to them to say, I have this awesome book, help me protect it. And that is their job. They said, we will help you protect and copyright everything, trademark it, your films, your books, and we're ready for anything that happens. We're on your side. So yeah, that was an investment, but it was well worth it because I have confidence that no one's going to touch my book, no one's going to steal my material, and if so, there's going to be trouble. There's going to be consequences.
I love that, dude, because I think that's something indie creators, like you said, it's an investment. It is, but it's a crucial part of what you need to do, and especially if you're trying to, run something as big as you're doing with in such a transmedia campaign-esque way that you've done it. You have like even what you're doing at your events, from the cosplay to showing the trailers to the film stuff to the comics. Like there's so many things built out from that, and to know that you are safe and you're protected behind all that, and it's yours, you own it, like it's copyrighted. That's a huge step that every creator needs to take a step into educating themselves now or during the creation process to move forward. I need to do that, to be honest. I need to be more diligent on that with Apollo and the publishing side as well. Especially once you go into the realm of becoming like an LLC or something, that's all part of it. You've got to take all the essential steps to run the business, in a fruitional way. And so, you were saying so much about just the film aspect, going back that far. A lot of people like, try to find a way to, I can't do this film because it's too big budget and it's too much. And so I go to the comic route. Were you a comic book fan growing up and like just going in that direction? And so is that what kind of inspired you to choose that, but aside from like prose or some other medium to chase after?
Yeah, I felt, the visual aspect of it is very important in storytelling to me as a filmmaker. The celluloid is my palette for my storytelling. So I think visually, and I thought, well, Bob would be a perfect fit for comic book form. I think the visuals would lend itself to good entertainment. Of course, there's always the idea of design. Which route should we go? Photo real? Should we keep it a little cartoon? What should we do? What's the best fit for our flavor of humor and horror and adventure? So you always kind of throw the dice on that. But I think once you secure the right illustrator, then it all just comes to fruition. So visuals first. And luckily, Francisco Resendez he's in the movies. He's into it. So I can say something visually like, let's have saturation and texture in the image, even in the backgrounds. Let's just not have some kind of flat plate or a graded something. Give me something that has texture, that looks like it has depth. And he got that. And I would point out movies like, let's look like at independent movies shot on 16 millimeters, something like, just off the top of my head, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Look at the way the saturation and the imagery looks. Let's kind of go for something like that so that it looks still high quality, but really raw. So that was the idea of book 0. And then when we got into book 1, he wanted to do something more classical. And I said, well, it fits the storyline if we're going back to 1700s France. If we're going to do that time frame, let's look at like Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon or Amadeus or something like that. I said, this is the color palettes I think we should hit, and this is the style and depth I think we should need for contrast and texture. He got it, and he went with it. Third book, I'm like, just look at Batman Returns. The book is cold. It's snowing. It's kind of, to use a term, but remember, noir is not a genre. It is a photographic or shooting style. I said, let's think a little Blade Runner on this. Let's keep it cool and ice. and he got it. And so when you look at the books, you have different aspects of a style through 3 books, especially color palette wise. It's like, okay, it's almost like, yeah, you started as an indie film, and then you got the bigger budget, and then you got the $100 million budget. This is kind of how I was thinking visually for the comic book. And luckily, Francisco knocked it out of the ballpark. He just got it, and it was every time we got illustrations, it was like Christmas, your birthday. You just looked at it, it was like, wow, this shines. Let's just keep going, and that's how it worked out.
Oh man. And see, like, having such a good strong film background, or even in general, finding a way to communicate with your artist in a way where you could see the same vision and just see it elevated. And those are great film examples for you to bring clarity to someone. Nothing's too abstract, nothing's too like, oh, I have to go do heavy dig research for this art film of some sort. But it's just like these are very distinct flavors that you're giving right there. Especially, I mean, you said Batman Returns, and then right when you said I was going for a cold aspect, like there, it just like clicked in my head. Like that makes so much sense for a good definition to give someone. Being a film person too, what are some what are some of like the films that drove you the most to not only pursue filmmaking, but like something you'd want to like transpose into a comic?
Well, I grew up 70s, 80s, so I was exposed to Frank Miller. I was exposed to Denny O'Neil and Jim Aparo, and I was exposed to some really awesome stuff. And Batman Detective and Swamp Thing, Alan Moore were like one of the first that were like, okay, especially Swamp Thing. I was like, this is something that I'd like to do. Something dealing with nature, something dealing with a paranormal but physical energy. I said, you know what, Swamp Thing is something that I'd like to do in the future. But when you're young and you're being exposed before the avalanche of Marvel films and all that, I haven't even seen the last 20 of them, and I won't.
Yeah.
But the point is
Vibes.
early on, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, wow, this would be really fun to do. And then after a while, 10, 15 years ago, now I'm like, I don't want to do anybody else's IP. I don't want to be in line to do Swamp Thing or Batman or whatever. I mean, it'll never happen. I mean, there's only 2, 3 people on that list. But I don't need to do that. I got something I think that is new, fresh, and better. So I'm going for it. And watching Conan the Barbarian, seeing all like Terminator and all the old Star Treks, and of course I grew up in the era of the original Star Wars and James Bond. I was right on the front seat of great cinema, not counting out the good stuff, like Sergio Leone and some of the older classics that John Huston did, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The list goes on. I come from a family that really likes cinema, so I was dragged around to movie theaters and stuff as a little kid, probably watching stuff I shouldn't have been watching, but it influenced me in an artistic way, not in a way that terrified me or put me off. Because after a while, it was like, how do they do that? I didn't know how they do that. So trade magazines were always handed to me by my family. You're reading. This is before the internet. You figure it out. And I was like, all right, looks like I got to figure it out. So those were the challenges in the old days. And I'm now seeing it come full circle because it looks better, it feels better, and it's just a lot more fun to do it that way.
It's kind of like comics, getting your hands dirty during the process. I'm doing some pages digitally, and because I'm kind of in a rush to knock them out. And I'm just like, I think I'm still gonna print out these pencils and ink it because this is feeling like it's just too much interface. Like I'm not a fan of doing everything by digital aspects. But I do love your approach there because I'm a big fan of like 70s and 80s films, especially because I like the essence of visual craft that are in them. You could tell, like, with the cameras that they're using or the monster effects, especially knowing that there's like an armature under there, and they're repairing it during in between takes and making things happen, and just like how do they pull off certain like grime or costumes. We just watched The Fly. The Fly is a great example of just like a bizarre put together outfit and whatnot. But going into that craft aspect, I think that's so admirable because you're really bringing it truly back. And I think more creators should have fun and dabble in those challenges, because those challenges I feel like are going to make you stronger and have a keener eye on things. What are some key things, like equipment wise, or things that you feel like are older craft that you're bringing into your filmmaking or your comic
Well,
book making as well?
well, the comic book making is, I like, I wanted to take that old fashioned Raiders of the Lost Ark attitude. You know what I mean? Where in a sense you do have a detailed story. It isn't just about getting to the next action sequence or the next horror moment. What we have been told about Bob is that when you sit down and read it, you read it. There's enough meat in there for you to actually read, and then you start looking at art and you keep going back and forth to the literature and the image. And so we know we have people there. And then, of course, oh, X amount of panels on a page and X amount of words and a balloon. And we stretched it a little bit because we had much more to offer. And I thought, well, if we can do it in a way that's still visually pleasing and not off-putting, we need to put as much as we can in the book without it being too saturated, without hand-holding the audience. So, you look at those old 70s Marvel, the Conans, I mean, you can have up to 12 frames on one page and no dialogue, and it's just awesome. It's like, well, we can do some of that, or there's something going on in the background. What do we do with the panel? You have something in the foreground. Let's have something going on in the background too, so people can see that the story is progressing. So we thought about it, and I think that's where the film aspect comes into everything, because when you are rolling film, everything inside that frame matters. Everything, foreground, background, sound, everything, you have to pay attention to it. Especially if you're putting it on celluloid, you don't have time to mess around. They say you don't get take 97. If you're Kubrick or somebody else that wants to waste time doing that, you go ahead and do that. But in the independent scene, no, you have to be ready.
For the audience, explain celluloid film, just so that they know as well.
Well, celluloid film is the actual real film process. This is 16 millimeter film. You can see the sprockets on this side. This is dead film that I had to snip off. So this is the real celluloid, exposed. It's a chemical process. So you got emulsions, you got chemicals, and what you do is when this is running through the camera, you're exposing it to light. So that image then is developed, processed, scanned. We don't have to make prints anymore. We don't have to cut negatives anymore. We can scan it. And you have your film ready to go in the digital realm. Now, video is an electronic signal. It's zeros and ones. It doesn't understand certain imagery and colors that film has mastered over the last 130 years. Video doesn't move like film. It doesn't color like film. And now I know there's going to be people that are crying that, yes, you can emulate it, but no, you cannot. You cannot. And you get one shot at video. Film, the scanning has gotten better and better. So as scanning gets better, your image gets better, so long as your negative is taken care of. So you have an electronic signal, which is video, and you have a chemical process, which is film. Now the film does all the work. You pick the right film stock, you photograph and light it properly, you scan it, your color correction is minimal. You spend, if you have this much time in the post-production for video, you have about that much time for film, because film's already doing the work for you. You just need to know how to photograph it. This is where I come in, and my colleagues. We're the old guard now. The old guard is going away. We're the next guy stepping up saying we can keep this process going. But only we have an edge. We can take an 8 millimeter camera, which is even a tinier, no, I don't have one here. Oh, here it is. A tinier film format. Look at how tiny that is. And cinematically, we can scan that and make it look just as good, not exactly like 16 millimeter, but close. And people are blown away. When they come to our Warehouse 9 showcase, we have 5 films shot on Super 8, mastered fantastically. People are like, that's Super 8? It's not like the Super 8 my grandfather used to shoot. I said, well, actually, it is. It's just the processing and the scanning and everything was a lot more poorer in the days. We've excelled. This is where film and digital shake hands nowadays. Now, this is where we shake hands. So that's the process in a nutshell, and it's a fascinating process. And I encourage real filmmakers. Don't call yourself a filmmaker if you're shooting on video. You're a videographer. Real filmmakers shoot on film, and this is what we do. We take pains to do this. And hey, if you want to be like the greats, you got to do like the greats did. Shoot on film.
I love that. I mean, that's very reflective, in some ways from digital to traditional artwork as well. There's some painstaking things from doing a traditional page versus a digital page. You don't get the undo button, and that's where
Right.
like a lot of inking looks so fascinating because you kind of, whatever happens, you got to roll with those mistakes sometimes or figure out ways around them to correct them. And just like with film, it's just there's a process to it, and where it's married to digital now is the scanning process and the editing, where you could just, remove the blue line and then just move on with your page and just touch up some small tones that are very minimal if you know what tools you're using for the scanning too. So I love that just mirrored reflection to comics throughout the process, and it shows your craft. And that was one of the coolest things I've ever heard too, by the way. Like I'm totally, I can't wait to, I want to watch the whole entire short film. I think I've just seen the trailer, but I really want to just analyze this thing now. And so regarding the story for for Bob, you have a short film out, and is it a full feature length as well as the short film, or is it just the short film you have for Bob? I might be mixed up.
Just the spin-off
Okay.
is a short film, a one reeler, 12 minutes.
So how did regarding, story and craft in that sense, you have a 3-issue story and then you have the short film. What did you choose to do for the spin-off? And how did you kind of craft that 12-minute story in a proper digestible way for people who don't want to check out the comic?
It was a heck of a gamble, I will say, and an extreme challenge because I said there were a ton of characters in this book. And should we actually take Bob and put him in a film? Should we use the main character and put him in a film? And then I realized, let's not do that. Let's take a subordinate character from the book, but a character that actually existed in history. LEGROS, who the film is based on, was a real hairstylist, hairdresser in 1700s France. He did the constructs of for Madame Pompadour, where we get the term pompadour. He worked for the French court. He had his own school. He had his own book. This guy was a heavy hitter in the old days. And he died mysteriously when Marie Antoinette came to town. The theory was he was trampled to death by accident. A mob tried to get to her and he was trampled to death. So what we did is we said, well, what if we take this character and we really just create an alternate persona for him? Like he's a Bruce Wayne by day as a hairdresser, but he's basically networking and then a paranormal adventurer by night. So that's the aspect we thought would be the best route to go. So I said, we need to go for it. And then the biggest hurdle was production design. How do you do 1700s France in Denver, Colorado? Well, any movie maker worth their salt just makes it happen. You know what I mean? You costumes. My partner is an awesome costumer. Started there. Hair constructs. Here, check this out.
Cool. Oh, that's sick. Oh man.
That light is probably too much, though.
It's a little bright on it, but it oh, there you go. Oh man.
This is one of the hair constructs.
Gosh.
That's
cool.
actually in the film.
I love that.
The LED lights really light up. And these cannons do something really cool in the film, but I'm not going to give it away.
Oh, how rad.
So something like that took me like 3 months to build.
Okay.
Getting a model, painting it, getting this wig that showed up that I paid $50 for, and it was just smashed. It looked like a car ran it over, because you get a pretty picture online and then it comes in a bag and then I have to style it. I don't know anything about styling. My own hair maybe, but not a wig. As a filmmaker, you learn these things. It's like, all right, I got to do this. Makeup. It's like, all right, what makeup's going to look good for certain photographic and lighting effects? So we had to study the makeup. The actual Bob scissors. They were made by, these are real too. These are the exact scissors that were designed for the book. Francisco Resendez has a schematic of these scissors. So I just sent it to my colleague, Chris Rink, who plays LeGros in the film. He's also a master fabricator. And he made the exact, I don't need a batarang. I got the scissors. You know what I mean? This is movie making, and this is the collaborative effort. And this is why I encourage people to do this, because you meet so many talented people. I can't make that. I can't do something like that. Chris can do something like that. I can't sew and make the costumes like my partner does. She does an amazing job. There are things I cannot do. So it's an awesome collaborative effort. And when you get together, people shine. Actors, they just shine when they're in costume. They're like, okay, now you're back in the 1700s. How do we do this? It's fun stuff. And so that's how it started. The comic book was the template. How do we make a wig monster in real life? How do we make hair constructs in real life? It's one thing to write it down and then have your illustrator draw it. It's a completely other thing when you have to build it and then photograph it. So LeGros took us 2 to 3 years total to make, because of the miniatures, the puppets, the costumes, the hair constructs. It took a considerable amount of time. And then the bulk of principal photography was maybe like 3 days. Most of it was just the pre-production, trying to get all this together, filming it in my basement. You know what I mean? Building little coaches and pulling them through bike paths at the park to make it look like it's a real thing going towards a big castle. You know what I mean? It was a heck of a process, and this is why we tie it in with the book. When people actually see the short film, they're totally blown away. They're like, we didn't realize this. And I was like, well, this is the point. I'm glad I surprised you.
That's so epic. Yeah, you've really expanded upon everything you're doing in that comic in such a bombastic way. And it's so, again, you take the time and you put the craft and the integrity behind it. And I think that's probably what makes it shine so much more amongst anything else, is that they see what you poured into the book and then what you poured into the film. And to put so much devotion into, like, especially a singular project, and myself included, it's hard for me to focus on one thing at a time. To really see it to fruition to the very end. But like, dude, this has been a long time coming for something like that, and it's pretty epic what you've constructed, but also what you've learned behind it too. It's cool to have resources, and that's the best thing you can do, by networking, by going out, by meeting people. Circling back to the beginning of our conversation, where you have friends who do these extra things that can elevate some of the aspects that you're not able to do. But it sounds like you challenged yourself a lot along the way as well. How did you challenge yourself when you were doing the book? Like, what lessons did you learn during that process, and what things like kind of really had to like elevate and really take a step back and learn something before finishing the book?
Well, I think what we ended up excelling at, and we have it in the book, 3 pages of our script template on how to kind of visualize how I feel is a better way to visualize your narrative in comic book form. So I basically take a screenplay template, but of course we panelize it and we put the proper page numbers on there for easy access, so that none of us get lost. The co-writer, Adam Boley, or the artist, we can automatically say, panel 2, page 2, we'll know exactly where everything is at and how it's scripted out. Learning the mechanics from Adam Boley, that was a learning curve for me. But what didn't feel right was, well, there's no real comic book script template. There's no real way to do this. So in order for me to visualize it properly, we ended up having to invent our own. So to me, that was step one. And then looking at the pacing of the story. So And my idea, I mean, I understand a traditional comic book storytelling, you know, the 22 to 26 pages. I understand how they do their arcs, and I was bored with that. I said, well, what if we take it and more of the approach to a 30-minute sitcom, a 26-minute sitcom like Seinfeld? You know what I mean? When you look at how that plays out, let's do that in comic book form rather than do what we've been told to do narratively forever. I don't handle that well when it's you're supposed to do it this way, and I'm like, I don't think so. I think it could be done this way and get the point across. So the learning curve was writing the script, and then when I was satisfied with it, and of course there were formatting tweaks to make me more comfortable for the next few books. That helped me out a lot. And then when it came down to after we found our artist, like the layout, you know, the first time I saw a layout, I was horrified. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I was like, what is this, dude? I don't even understand this. And Adam had to walk me through it. No, the story's there. These are just the quick sketches and the panels and the basic layout. I was like, this looks like a mess to me. I can't decipher this. So after considerable study, I was like, okay, I get what he's after, so I approve. You know, the buck starts and stops with me. So after that approval method happened, and then the pencil started to come through, it all started to come together for me. I was like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, I can now see it, how it's supposed to play out better and better. So that book Zero, man, that was a learning curve. But I think every book after that, we were a machine. It was like, okay, we had it down. We knew exactly all the steps that were necessary just to keep this thing moving forward. But book Zero, boy, that horrified me for a minute. I was like, oh man, is this going to really work? You know what I mean? And then when it did, it was like, okay, I get the process. You know, right down to the lettering. Right down to okay, now we're getting into the safety margins. We're getting into the splash. We're getting into printing aspects of it. You got to think into the future, just like a film. This is going to be projected most likely digitally, but you have to have the right aspect ratio. You make sure that nothing is cut off when it's being played. You got to do all that. So yeah, I admit that book Zero was tough for me. But after it was done, I was confident enough to say, hey, let's just keep rolling this out. We can do this.
You know, I think that's one thing I don't hear enough because thumbnails and layouts really do throw off writers at first because you're just like, I kind of get like there's some scribbles on here that are the panel detail I put down, but I don't really, is this gonna work? Like that's probably one of the most I think underrated things that all of us need to process. Even as an artist, as I was learning how to draw, I didn't realize the importance of that. I kind of felt like, oh, I could just skip that step. It's so non-essential where you could just kind of blast by it. And then when you start drawing, you're like, you know what? That's like the most pivotal step for you to even start the drawing. It's just that base scribble. And just, it's kind of like, I don't know, sometimes when I do a script page, I'll put, page one, panel 1, 2, 3, 4. And that way or just put something like that, or a one sentence thing. That way, when I go back to that page, I'm not facing that blank page syndrome, like there's something on there. The rest just kind of pours out, some of that formatting in a sense is easier to process through. And as like a filmmaker too, I think the number one thing I see from editing books is filmmakers have an adjustment from doing too many movements in a panel into a comic. Did you have to like kind of convert any ideas or kind of rework stuff because of things like that? Did that ever like give you a hiccup?
I think it didn't because Francisco got it, and there's this moment of realization too that okay, I'm writing and producing this book. I'm not illustrating it, so I'm not the director. I basically passed the torch to the illustrator, and it's up to them to secure our vision. So that was one thing that was something that that was a hard pill to swallow at first. Then I thought it shouldn't be because on my best day I could never do what this illustrator does. So let him work his magic. And if he had a suggestion of movement or non-movement or bleeding images into other panels, and it worked. It worked. His control started to grow, and rightly so, because basically at that point, that the illustrator's the director. I now got to just sit back and let them do their job. And that was difficult, but then after a while, I loved it because I was like, I can't do this, and I wouldn't want to be doing this because this is talent. This is talent. This is a talent I don't have. So let the talented people just do it. And you step back and you let them go for it, and then they'll come back with notes. Maybe we should try this. Maybe we can do this in the panel. I'm like, go for it. We got nothing to lose. Let's see what it looks like. So it came together very, very well with very minor hiccups after a while. I think communication was the key, and us all being aboard and understanding what's important for the story. But basically, Francisco directed this book. I didn't. We wrote it, we edited it, that's it. He directed it. It all fell on his shoulders.
So where did, out of all creators, I think that's always one of the biggest struggles is that control of power. And, some people are very collaborative and very open. And some people have, are very strict in their vision and what they did. So where did you learn, or what taught you to be collaborative in that sense and open to collaboration in such a way?
Growing up, in the workforce, growing up in a family-owned business, growing up being around characters and specimens that are from evil to ultimate good. You learn to say, how do you get through the 8-hour day without trouble? You know what I mean? And if I'm a team lead or supervisor, I usually had to be one to say, all right, shut up. This is how we got to do it. This is just, or it's my way or the highway. If you want to go home at 4:30, this is how we got to get it done. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Artistically, when you're working with talented people, and sure, I may have a line written down, but if the actor says, well, can I try it this way and it's better, just, okay, go with it. I wrote it down, but if you made it better, why do I need to fight it? It's a collaborative effort. How should we play it? Well, I don't know. I have this idea of playing this character, but you're the actor. What is your interpretation? We discuss it, and usually we find common ground. And there are times where I just see nothing that I need to do, and they handle it. Or some actors take a little bit more direction. It's just depending on the moment. If I have somebody like the Vincent Olin who plays Fremont, LeGros' assistant in the film, this is a guy that really existed in history. He was LeGros' real assistant. He actually escaped the French Revolution. He almost had his head cut off. He was a professional hairdresser. And Vincent was like, well, how do I play this guy? And I'm like, I have no idea. This is all the information I can give you on this guy. He's an upstart. He wants to dethrone LeGros and basically take over his business in school. He wants to out with the old and with the new is his attitude. And that's how he ended up playing it. More like a butler than a colleague, because he's taking care of LeGros in the film. So we made all that up. Is it truth to history? Nobody knows. That's the fun of it. But it's based off of a real individual. So, Vincent thought about it and was like, yeah, I'm okay. I know how to play it now. And then once we got it, we just went with it. It was like he's got to sheep herd the drunken hairstylist. You know what I mean? He's got to make sure he does his job. And he's always getting insulted and always trying to help out. It's a miserable job. Disgruntled employee, So we played it out like that. And their chemistry was great, and people laugh. And they were like, these were real guys in history. I said, well, yeah, but we don't know how they really acted. We're making all of this up. It's cinema. Same in the comic book. We don't know, but we put the historical elements in there to get people to read, to say, look, you can go look this guy up. You're going to find some really cool information on him. And it's goofy. But now we took it to the next level. So in the collaboration, you got to let people breathe. You just got to let them breathe. There are moments where I'm like, the frame's only this big. You have to stand here. You have to look there because that's where the monster is. You have to do this. But the rest is in your hands. You act it out. You know what I mean? Once I say go, we see how it happens. Hey, that was great. Moving on. So even that that's the fun part of all of this. All of this, from the comic books to the films, is just working with great people, and it keeps you socially active. It keeps those muscles flexed. You know, you gotta keep doing that.
I love that. Yeah, no, honestly, collaboration is the best thing you could do in a book, and being open. You're gonna get such better results that way. You're gonna just have a better team that's gonna want to push the project that you're creating. You're gonna have people that want to show up every day to it. It's cultivating a good work environment in a big way. You know, like you don't want a boss that kind of micromanages you and bashes on you for stuff. You wanna go in and feel encouraged and motivated, and your projects, especially when you're getting off work, and this is, you do your day job, whatever it may be, or night shift, and then you have to still go and create afterwards. You want to be in an environment that's going to, like, you're excited to go back to. You want to enter that realm again and have a blast and escape some of this. And that's why we create a lot of the times, is to escape the madness and, create that fun, energetic insanity that is comics and film and other mediums. And that's probably the best way you could put to, really just enjoy collaboration and just get a great product out there. Because now you've formatted all these things. We didn't even get to touch on the website stuff too much too, because I love how you tied in so many details to that website. There's links to all that here in the episode description. But you throughout the episode, you've mentioned not only just like film references, or for examples, but like how you structured your story, and like how you kind of Seinfeld as an example. But what are some of the other films and TV shows that taught you story, to really present it, and that things that you've studied, or things that you kind of go back to, that really showed you how a story should be structured, how to pull the proper elements from, or the right message to get across and whatnot.
I think originally it was Star Trek, the '60s version, the Generation version, um, Twilight Zone. I mean, you looked at how these stories played out. I mean, you look at the old shows like Columbo, Rockford Files. Yeah, I'm dating myself, but
Yeah,
they
I'm
have
a fan of all those.
dude.
Columbo's the
Yeah,
shit.
the meat within one episode of those stories is so heavy, and you don't see that today. You just don't. You have not seen that like in the last 20 years.
I
But
get
the
made fun of
meat.
for loving MASH. MASH is one of my favorite shows
Oh,
ever
somebody
because
the
it's
other
just
day was like, "I gotta go. My favorite TV show's on." Well, I was like, "Which one?" He's like, "MASH." And I was like, "Okay." You know what I mean? Yeah, he's like, "Oh man, Alan Alda. That's it. He's the man. I can't stop laughing." I was like, "Groucho Marx." You know what I mean? I was like, so I get it. So in those heavy days of Rod Serling, you look at the Twilight Zone, you look at Planet of the Apes, you look at how stories evolve, you look at how sometimes there's that dark element there, but you could still have that touchy humor. I never believe that the world is that serious. No matter how bad it is, humanity still laughs and makes fun of something. And that's kind of an aspect I take, with Bob. Initially, it's we want to be funny, and a lot of people are surprised. Wow, this is a funny book, until it gets violent, and it's like, well, that's the point. You know what I mean? We want to be able to keep people on that roller coaster ride. So when I look at those old films and television shows, look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, how it just plays out operatically. Once upon a time in the West, how it's all visual and music for just minutes on end. I'm like, well, I can stare at that frame forever. And I want a person to do the same thing with the Bob book. Look at a panel, just stare at it. What's all in there? So luckily, I was influenced by that. And then literarily, I loved Robert E. Howard, Conan. I loved Ian Fleming, James Bond. I mean, amazing fictional writers that just blow you away. So
people overlook those Bond books. I'm a huge fan of them, dude. They're so good. Like, way better than any iterations of the films in general. Like,
absolutely. I mean, Bond blew me away how well they're written. I
yeah.
look at Edgar Allan Poe, all his short stories, and like I'd say the Raven's a one reeler, and how it plays out perfectly with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a history. I was like, well, but these guys were geniuses. Were they, or did they just take the time to do it properly? you know.
Yeah. That's
So my
it's
influence
the
goes deep
craft.
with that. Yeah, it's the craft, and it's something that's like, okay, I need to write a story. What are the elements? All right, I better sit down and write the story. That's how it hits me. Um, there's so much out there for people to enjoy. I mean, and it takes a lifetime to look through. But like we talked about the Bond books, I was at Barnes and Nobles, and they have a new edition of the Bond books. I didn't flip through them to see. Hopefully, they're still as accurate as my old Signet books that I got from the '60s, at a used bookstore. But I kind of pissed off the management because they were out of order. So I went and put them in the proper order and rearranged the whole shelf. And they're like, "What are you doing, man?" I was like, "The books are out of order." Well, there's no numbers on them or anything. You don't go by the numbers. You go by the years in the cover. You know what I mean? And I laid them all out and then noticed, well, where's Man with the Golden Gun? Where's the last book? They're like, well, that one's not in print. I'm like, how can you not have the last book in the series? Well, it's just they never released it. I was like, then this series is not complete. So I was like, wow, how did this happen?
Insane.
And it was just one of those things of, hey, it annoyed me. And then some people saw me doing it, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm fixing the Bond books. This is the way it should be. You need to start here, and you need to end here."
People who, if you want to make a really good overarching story about a singular character, like the Bond books are a great example. It's, I tried to watch them. I think I was reading them in order of the movies releasing, and I didn't realize that there was an overarching story behind all of it until like, my second, third book in. And then it's crazy the contrast of who Bond is in the books versus the film iterations. I probably, the recent ones were probably the closest to who Bond probably truly was, in terms of like having like morals and a character and like just actual like thoughts and like feelings for people. But it's crazy how it changed for the films, just so much, and one for entertainment value, of course, and it was the times and era. But I really, I have so much admiration for those books, man. They're really great, and I mean the things that you get out of them, and Bond's just arc through all of it. You're like, oh crap, dude, you were hurting by the end of this whole series. You were a dude in pain. Like, yeah, it's dope. It's really shocking.
I love it, and I like also how it reads like a travel log. All the countries and the food and the three-ring blend cigarette of the Jamaican brand. Everything and all the booze, everything that he was indulged in, and it has his description in there. He's 2 meters tall, 165 pounds, Caucasian male, gray eyes, scar on his face, and the patch on his hand for when they carve Smersh in it. You know what I mean? It's like, the books are genius, and I always tell everybody, you want a good character arc, you want to see read all the Bonds and read all the Conans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you're going to get, Conan was basically the James Bond of the fantasy world.
Yeah, straight up, yeah.
Yeah, that's how
Honestly,
I say it. He's the James Bond. So those two there, and I got some people reading my Conans, and she's writing a novel, and she's like, wow, these Conans are really fun. I said, aren't they? I said, and he wrote like it in 3 drafts. He wrote that story. I can't understand it.
Dude, yeah, Howard was a beast. When you look up all the works that he was part of, like it shocked me. He has such a wide just spectrum of stories outside of Conan. You think it's just Conan he's known for, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's more. Like he brilliant, and he was dude from Texas. You know what I mean? Out of all things,
South Plains, Texas. I mean, I love Solomon Kane, Brackmon Morn, all of his stuff. As a child, I was glad to be exposed to that, and it helped me literarily. That he helped me learn how to read. I will say it. I tip my hat to him. He helped me learn how to read.
I love that. Oh, it's a great note to end on as well, dude. Lance, this has been a beyond fascinating interview. Thank you so much for what you do and what you hone to your heart as a creator. I think craft is something. Just the elements of craft and doing something that's true, and putting the work in and challenging yourself. That's what it's all about to be a creator. And truly, like, I think more people need to chase that and aspire to that, and to continue to challenge themselves like that too. So many creators out here in the indie realm do. But I think from front to back, this conversation has just been packed with information. So everyone needs to go out there and network with their local bookstores, with their local Barnes and Nobles and Books A Million, and just shops in general. Like that's going to take you guys so far So, anyone who missed the beginning of this conversation, check it out. And of course, this is on all podcast platforms the next day as well. Lance, why don't you tell us about any upcoming events, where to find your work? We have tons of links in the episode as well, but please announce for those listening too.
Yeah, you can go to warehouse9pro.com. That's where we hang our hat. You're going to find all the information about Bob and our films right there. And of course, our big showcase in 2 weeks, November 22nd, the Bug Theater, 7 o'clock. 8 amazing films. Most of them are Warehouse 9 productions, but we did secure a new one. Filmmaker Rainis failed from Latvia. And he was shooting 35, 16, Super 8 for this little micro short. That is awesome. So I was happy to curate that, and I think people are going to love it. We're excited about it. But yeah, film shot on film, and once again, it goes back to the education and networking process. You show up to the event, you meet people, you learn how it's done, and hopefully you're inspired. Plus the Bob book signing, we're going to have the signing. All these books are going to be signed for everybody that wants it. Door prizes. I mean, we're making it an event like it used to be decades ago when you went to the movies. You know what I mean? We're making it an event, and people are very excited about this. So other than that, I might have a book signing at the Barnes & Nobles in Boulder, but I have to confirm a date. And once I do that, I will release that to the world. But in the meantime, we're rocking like Dockin' over here at W9. We're not stopping. We're gonna keep rolling. That's a dated joke, by the way, and I think you got it.
I got it. Yeah, no, I'm a big Dockin' fan. Dockin' rules, dude.
Yeah, Dockin' rules, yeah.
Dude, I love that. Thank you so much, Lance. This has been a great evening. I appreciate, respect, admire everything you do. I can't wait to check it. I wish I could be at that film festival because, dude, what you're doing, making it a true event and a spectacle and a reason to show up early, that's rad. Like, that's what you got to do. You know what I mean? You're supporting art, you're supporting films, you're supporting that business, that theater as well. And that's the key thing, is getting people a reason to get out and go and do things. So hats off to you, dude. Thank you so much for everything, man. And thank you all for tuning in tonight to Inspired Inc. We'll be back next week. I'm so excited. We have a whole month booked full of interviews. And don't forget to check out our virtual con, which will be a Black Friday weekend. If you guys want to check out panels or apply to a panel, shoot us a message. We're also going to have a link in our bio as well to open it up to more creators. So we'll end with that. But thank you guys so much. It's been a great night.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
Oh wait, before we end, I'm gonna end it on the proper sound bite, because that was a whole thing right there. All right, now we're good. All right, cool.
Print your comics with Comix Wellspring.